Welcome to Sapien Analysis.
So how did you actually started focusing on women particularly instead of, going with the flow?
Going with the flow. Well, I'd say that, we have to kind of trace this back to where I started.
Sure.
And I started out being trained both as a therapist and doing neuropsychological testing. And as I did neuropsychological testing, I found there were kids who had a certain kind of pattern. And these were kids who often weren't well understood. And so I became interested, and these were kids who had social issues. These were kids who tended to be very inflexible, difficult as their parents saw them. And these kids, at first, I began to learn a lot about nonverbal learning disabilities. And it's interesting because Tim Walsh, who is a vice presidential candidate, has talked about his son who has a nonverbal learning disability, which is actually a neuropsychological profile. It's not a psychiatric diagnosis, but these kids have issues taking in information through the verbal channel. And that was many of the kids that I was seeing, that they had verbal intellectual capacity that was way up here, but their nonverbal processing was more down here. And as one little boy told me, it's like my mind is the roadrunner and this other part of me is the coyote,
Huh.
And
Interesting.
so I started becoming interested in these kids and writing about them and seeing them. And the neuropsychological profile of NLD tended to also be the neuropsychological profile of children who were Aspergers, which is now considered part of the autistic spectrum. And so I found myself moving into not just children who were identified as having a nonverbal learning disability, but children who were on the autistic spectrum and learning about them. And so as I was writing things like explanations aren't excuses, so that if you had a child who wasn't doing what you wanted, okay, the child was only doing the last thing you said, child with ADHD, or the child was for the nonverbal learning disability child, was only taking in things through the verbal channel. So mom says, this bag is really heavy. And the child goes, and they go into the house, and then mom's mad. And, well, why are you mad? Because you didn't offer to help carry the bag. Well, you didn't ask me to help carry the bag, right? That was supposed to be inferred. That was nonverbal by the face mom made when she said the bag was heavy, but the kid's not picking up on the face. So I started writing about how understanding these children isn't an excuse for behavior, it's an explanation, so we know how to explain something, how to be direct, how to tell somebody exactly what we want them to do, all this sort of stuff. So I got interested in the children who were Asperger's and what they were like, and kept moving on. And what I started reading about was how girls were underidentified. And I became very interested in that. And what I discovered is that unidentified girls grew up to be unidentified women. And one of the aspects of being on the spectrum, if you are missing social cues, right now you have your hand like this, and you're kind of furrowing your brow a little bit. That's all nonverbal, okay?
Right.
And if you sort of did something different, that might signal, oh, she's not saying something interesting. Okay. But if I'm on the spectrum, I miss that. Or if I have nonverbal learning disability, I miss that. I miss that cue that tells me I'm on track or I'm not on track. Okay. And so kids who are on the spectrum, and a lot of kids with NLD, feel they don't fit in because they're missing cues. And people have written that as much as 50 to 70% of social emotional communication is nonverbal. I might say something like, get out of here. Okay. And then I might say, get out of here.
Uh-huh.
Those mean two different things, but I said exactly the same thing. If you're
Right.
only tuning in to what I said, you heard the same thing. But
Right. Right.
picking up on the tone of voice is not verbal. Okay. So if you're only picking up on what I said and not the nonverbal cues, you don't know what I mean. And especially if you're relying on what's verbalized and not what's non-verbalized, you might see me a week from now and say, "Oh, it's so nice to see you. Why don't we make it time to get together?" You might not mean any of that. You might just be being polite.
Right.
But if I don't pick the nonverbal cues up, I think you want to see me next week. And okay, when do we meet? What's our time? And you're embarrassed because that's not what you meant. So girls who are but this is inside. And if somebody has sensory issues, let's say they're very sensitive to sound, or they're very sensitive to smell, and they're around someone wearing strong perfume, or it's a very noisy environment, she might be having a very strong reaction that's very emotionally, throwing her off, but nobody knows why. Nobody knows what's going on inside. And so she's getting a lot of negative feedback that you're a drama queen. Okay, you just want attention. Or, you always are saying no, everything has to be your way. Or you don't listen to what I say, or whatever. And she can develop a sense of shame and a sense of failure, that I never fit in and people are always telling me I'm wrong. And so often girls who grow up into women who aren't diagnosed are struggling to understand themselves. Why don't I fit in? Why can't I do what other people seem to do so easily? But nobody's ever picked up on it, even when they have as many autistic traits as boys, because you don't see it, because they don't present in the same way. So I got very interested in women who had been undiagnosed. So there's a track from neuropsych testing that ends me up with diagnosing undiagnosed women, because what I felt for were kids who were being reprimanded and made to feel bad about themselves for reasons that weren't understood and that they didn't understand, to adults who are feeling that way, because children grow up into being adults. And if they still haven't been identified, they're still struggling with all that. So I have women coming to me who are 18 and 20, and I have women who are coming to me who are 60 and who are still struggling to understand themselves and to have a sense of being empowered and pride in themselves. What I tell them is, you're not a broken PC, you're a Mac. You have a different operating system.
Right.
But
Right.
you're a fine computer,
Yeah.
but you have to run you're stuck running programs that maybe you weren't built for.
Right.
And so I'll give you an example. Okay. When you go to a school and there's something, a presentation in the auditorium. Okay. Or you go to a shopping mall at Christmas time and there's music playing and people are spraying cologne on everybody who walks by and all that. If you have sensory issues, okay, or then loud clapping is going to be, very
Yeah.
difficult,
Yeah.
or having that kind of smell is going to be very difficult. And if you go to a conference where people are on the spectrum, people do that.
Right.
Shows that they're, applauding, but they're not doing it in a noisy way. I mean, there's no and shopping malls actually in the US, many of them have quiet time before they open at Christmas time, where the lights are lower and they don't turn on the music and nobody's spraying perfume, where somebody who has sensory issues can shop. So they're beginning to make accommodations for people,
Yes.
but they're still thinking mostly of children. They're not necessarily realizing that they're dealing with hundreds of thousands of unidentified adults.
Right. Right.
This video is brought to you by Allura Online. If you love our fantastic videos, guess what? Allura Online can create amazing content for you too. Want to elevate your brand with top-notch videos? Check out the Fiverr link in the description or send a private email for more details. Act now and snag some exclusive discounts. Don't miss out. Contact Allura Online today and take your content to the next level.